Who here has missed a putt inside of 4 feet the last time they played? Okay, you're in a good place. Who here has had a 3-putt last time they played? Okay. Who here has an affliction that they affectionately call the yips? Nobody admits it, right? But it might be there. And so the refreshing part is everything that we're going to learn today is found in this book. But what we're going to do is we're going to, again, transform your putting stroke even faster. That's why we're here. And also share with you there is a continuity of fundamentals that apply to every part of your game. You know, the same stuff that we talk about in your putting is also going to apply to your chipping, pitching, bunker play, and ultimately your full swing. So diving right into it, the most common issue that we see in putting is also a common issue you see in every other part of the game, but it's worse in the putting stroke because this club is the shortest club in your bag. And what I mean by that is we will all have the tendency of bending over more from the middle part of our back. Now, if I do this, first of all, it's going to add a lot of pressure to my low back. For those of us who complain that I cannot practice my putting because my back hurts, this would be the most fundamental reason why. On a secondary perspective, if I bend over from the middle part of my back, if I got into more erect posture, what happens to my ability to properly rotate? It goes down. So if I'm bending over into my posture by doing this, I can't turn. The very best I can do from this posture is lift my shoulder on the way back. Twofold issue here. First of all, if I lift the shoulder on the way back, that club's going shut and outside. And so if I just return the blade back to the golf ball, it's going dead left. A lot of people develop the yips, Bernhardt Longer included, because he was told by his pro growing up, you want to get your eyes over the golf ball when you putt, get into this very kyphotic posture. He would lift and then have to lift on the way through. Secondarily, if I got into this posture, how many different ways can my shoulders lift around my spine? And they go a lot of different ways, right? So this is going to create a lot of inconsistency regarding the path the putter actually travels around my body. And so, again, I know what you might be thinking, well, what about Jack Nicklaus? You know, Jack Nicklaus's posture looks like this, and I would never say to anybody that the way you putt is wrong. The question, of course, is how many moving parts do you have, and how quickly can you develop proficiency and consistency? You know, this is Jack's 9-to-5 job, and was anyhow, and if you practice anything for 6 or 7 hours a day, you're going to get pretty good at it. That being said, there's not one player presently on the PGA Tour that does anything close to resembling what Nicklaus did. And if it was so good, you expect more. And so you want to take a look at his style, and he honed his game on very different conditions than what we see today. So a whole piston-style stroke and adding a little bit more dynamic loft would be warranted on slower greens. Nowadays, not the case. So before we delve into what I call the 4 secret body locks, which will systematically get rid of all the unwanted range of motion of your hands, arms, elbows, and shoulders, that would literally force your putter to work only one way around the body, making your short putts automatic. Before we talk about the distance control secrets on how to better calibrate your speed on 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, even 70-foot putts, regardless of the green speed we're talking about, I do want to kind of lay it out real quick that we will not talk at all today about the path that this putter travels around my body. You're not going to hear me say once that this putter goes straight back, straight through, or on an arc. Not saying it's not important, but it's on a fundamental. Because the way this putter travels around my body is based upon how I rotate, which is based upon my posture. So if I'm focusing on where the putter's moving in some arbitrary place in space, without first focusing on my posture, I'm putting the carriage before the horse. And I'm offering literally this much opportunity for that long-term progress that we're all looking for. And so the one rule we're going to lay out very quickly is I want you to always ask me the question why. If I can't tell you why you should do something, you probably shouldn't do it. Now, this is the best first golf lesson I can give anybody. As a newly married man, worst thing you can do with your wife. Never, ever, ever ask your wife the question why everything is yes, dear. But on the golf course, we want to understand intimately why we do what we do. So before we delve into these secrets, I do have a confession to make. I never thought in a million years I'd be coaching major champions or traveling to a spot like this, teaching a seminar of this capacity. Everything for me got started in an effort to help people with Parkinson's disease play golf with reduced tremors and with better balance after my own father was diagnosed. And so, that's really where I thought my career as an instructor would end, in that I started putting together my first clinic when I was 11 years old, getting people with Parkinson's disease onto a golf course. And I had some issues with that, although it was a lot of fun and very fulfilling for me. We would see a lot of the tremors and the propensity for them to fall over. So I did what any kid would do. I mowed a few lawns, saved up my lunch money, and I found myself in front of the best instructor locally that I could. And this one gentleman was a low amateur at the Masters and a very accomplished player, but I found it extremely frustrating that when I started repeating this stuff to my students and friends who had Parkinson's, they would fall more often, their tremors became more apparent. And on my side, in a moment of juvenile frustration, I started doing the opposite of what this guy was telling me And all of a sudden they fell less frequently and their tremors became less apparent. And so it created a lot of cognitive dissonance and forced me to, write these letters to these top doctors up at the Mayo Clinic and basically saying, hey, my name is Eric Kaplan. My father has Parkinson's. I'm very passionate about golf. I'm finding some things to be interesting. Would you be willing to take a call? And so I started researching with all these, top doctors that honestly knew absolutely nothing about the golf swing, but everything about the body. And it's that synergy of concept that we developed these 4 secret body locks. And again, between you and I, that's really where I thought my career as an instructor would end. I thought I would do outreach programs across the country and really fulfilling stuff, considering what got me involved in the game to begin with. Which is when, close to 5 years ago now, I got a call from a gentleman named Bernhard Langer, basically saying, Eric, I hear you have a methodology to help people with neurological issues. I've got the ifs, can you help me? And literally overnight, I went from working with people that could barely walk to inside the ropes at Augusta National. And so all of a sudden, I found myself in front of a much bigger audience, especially considering that the same fundamentals we applied to Bernhard's putting stroke is exactly the same stuff we applied to his chipping, pitching, bunker play, and ultimately his full swing. So one of the reasons I think he's been so successful on that tour is not just because he's an incredible competitor and super focused and practices a whole bunch, but there's a continuity of fundamentals that apply to every part of his game. There's less deviation, there's less change. And the more things you keep the same, the more consistent you're going to be. And so what we're going to do over the course of today is we're not so much going to redefine fundamentals, but refine our understanding of what fundamentals are. So we're going to build this piece from the ground up, starting with stance width. Because even in putting, we want to understand how far wide our feet should be. And so I find the best way to learn is open forum and dialogue. So what have you guys heard regarding stance width?
Shoulder width.
Shoulder width, right? And so the question, of course, is why? Are your feet connected? Are your feet connected to your shoulders?
Yes, eventually.
Eventually, but not directly. So what I found using Parkinson's as a lens is that whether it be putting or the full swing, if somebody with Parkinson's disease is either too narrow or too wide, they're going to fall off balance one way or the other. And so what's interesting about this is that this one stance width we apply to Bernhard's putting stroke is the same thing with a full swing pitching wedge or a full swing driver. Now the goal in the full swing is twofold. I want to be able to shift my pressure, rotate, shift my pressure, rotate while my head stays centered. We can all basically agree upon that. The couple of things you're going to notice, if my stance width creeps too narrow, if I try to shift my weight, I'm going to sway, or my lower body will over-rotate in my backswing, leading to a club that gets more inside, potentially reverse pivoting. If I get too wide, I cannot return to a position called neutral joint alignment. Simply put, the position where the hip, knee, and ankle are on one line, and with it, the safest place to pivot and post around the hip socket. So the reason why everyone says shoulder width apart, and the reason why I would not say you're wrong in saying it, is built upon the fact that most instruction is built upon aesthetic, or the way better players appear to play. Jack Nicklaus happens to have shoulders that sit exactly outside of his hips. So to say to Jack Nicklaus, put your feet shoulder width apart, is true for him, but not true for everybody. You take a look at a guy like Tiger Woods. Tiger's built like a Greek god. His shoulders are massive, and his waist is very narrow. So when Butch told Tiger to be shoulder width apart for his driver, would you expect that he was too wide or too narrow? Too wide. And for this reason, if you get too wide, you can't return back to this neutral position. Not only does that cause you to hang back, leading to some wild blocks to the right, but it also puts more pressure on the knee and ACL. And so one of the reasons as to why you found a lot of consistency with his middle irons is, of course, because he was told you want to have a variable stance width. He got a little bit more narrow for his middle irons, wise to go with those clubs, but he also gets a little bit too narrow from what I would say with his full swing wedges, which will change the firing rate of the lower body, leading to a little bit of spin and distance control issues, which you've always seen in his career. And so for me, what's been fun is saying to a guy like Bernhard, let's keep everything the same. And even though it seems a little bit less important in putting, if your stance width creeps too narrow in the putting stroke, it does invite a little bit of instability of the pelvis. If I get too wide, I'm going to have a propensity of hitting my putts a little bit heavy or scuffing my putts. And so we want to apply the same fundamentals for everything. And even though we're not talking about a full swing course here, let's kind of echo these reverberations of keeping everything the same. Because the bottom of your swing arc in the full swing is opposite your left shoulder. This is the point of furthest extension from the body. If somebody says to you, you're holding a pitching wedge, therefore get a more narrow stance width arbitrarily, the ball position looks like it's moving further back. If somebody says, hey, you're holding a 3 would move the ball position more forward in your stance, get a wider stance width, the ball position aesthetically looks like it's moving further forward. If you get rid of one variable, you don't need the other. And that's where, even though, it's a little bit less important in putting, and I'm cautious where I say this, why not keep the same fundamentals? And that's where I would not say it's wrong in putting your feet shoulder width apart, but most women get thrown under the bus regarding instruction. Most women have more of an hourglass build. or sometimes their hips are wider than their shoulders. So if a woman is told to be shoulder width apart, they will be too narrow. There will be power loss associated because they cannot pressure shift. And from there, if the lower body over-rotates, you're going to get inside, you lift to get across the line, and either you have to learn how to reroute or you'll come over the top. Again, systemic from a misunderstood fundamental. Make sense so far? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're literally going to break down these fundamentals bit by bit. We're going to understand intimately why we do what we do, and then we're going to show you how to put it all together. And that's literally the fastest way in which we can make a change. So the next thing we're going to dive into, and before I do, I just want to share with you guys that if there's a question about anything, please stop me. I'm not up here preaching. We're literally going hand in hand from where we are to where we want to be, going through the steps to get there, and the key word there is steps. So next thing we're going to talk about, yep.
I just had one. I didn't fully understand the point you were making about ball positions you change stance with.
For sure. And so the bottom of your swing arc in the full swing, the point of furthest extension,
right,
is opposite that left shoulder pit. And so that's where the club's going to bottom out. And so if you were to change your stance width, that relative ball position would move between your feet because the stance width is changing. If you get wider, that relative ball position moves. So by keeping the stance width the same for your pitching wedge as well as your 3 wood, the bottom of your arc will also stay the same. And so that's where, for as long as somebody's learning how to play golf for the first time, thinking to him or herself that you have 14 different stance widths for 14 different clubs, it's a lot of variables. And even for a guy like Bernhardt saying, let's keep everything the same, adds a little bit of a different layer of polish and consistency. So the next thing we're going to talk about, again, of fundamental importance, is weight distribution on the feet. Do we want to play golf or even putt with the weight on our toes, our heels, our ankles, or over the balls of the feet when we play golf? Balls of the feet. So, not to put you on the spot, but have you ever been told that you want to keep your head down when you play golf, or you want to stay in your posture, not early extend, or rotate your lower body faster?
Yeah.
We all have, right? And so the issues that we see on this capacity is systemic based upon this misunderstanding. When you take an objective look at human anatomy, we are actually not designed to carry weight on the balls of our feet. If I stand up in a neutral position, you could plumb a line, ear, shoulder, hip, knee, ankle. My body's designed to carry weight and center its weight right there. The moment I get more than 50% of my weight over the ball of my foot, from here what ends up happening, I begin engaging my quadriceps. These are muscles that cause me to come up and out of my posture and early extend, which is certainly not great. And so I'm going to borrow you as a model if I could. First of all, give him a round of applause. So he doesn't know what he's in for. When's the last time you did a headstand? I'm just kidding. So I want you to go ahead and balance on your left foot and hold on to me with both hands. Good. So if you were to get your weight over the ball of your foot, so come a little bit more forward. Good. So from here, which is again where you said you want to center the weight, try to rotate your lower body towards the target. Okay. Now what I want you to do is get the weight back over the ankle joint and try to do the same thing. A little bit easier?
Way easier.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting about this is that just by changing where you center your weight drastically changes the muscle groups that are engaged. For as long as we're all told to put the weight in the balls of our feet, we're putting our body in a position where we are in our own way. And so one of the first things I saw working with people with Parkinson's is that if they got their weight on the ball of their foot, and when I was 11 years old, I put together my first clinic, and these people would show up with what seemed like full body armor, helmets on, elbow pads. Some of them had pillows strapped around their waist with duct tape because they were fully prepared and knowledgeable that they were going to make a swing and fall forward. It was one moment out of juvenile frustration, even though my instructor was telling me to put the weight in the balls of your feet because Tiger Woods was doing it, where I hinged him into a posture where literally all of his weight was back over the ankles. And for me, it was the very first time that I had saw him swing without falling. And so for me, it created a lot of cognitive dissonance. And using this idea is how we maintain the neutrality of the spine. Because the last thing I'd want you to do is say, hey, Eric, is my spine neutral now? Am I back over the ankles now? From here, you do nothing but falling off balance. What we're talking about here is what we reference to be the primary tilt of the golf swing, where we'll do this together in a moment, but just to kind of illustrate the point, if I were to put my hands on my thighs and hinge my thighs back while my upper body comes down, my spine stays neutral. Now I'm counterbalanced over the ankle joint. If I were to add a little bit of flex to my knees, now I'm centered over the ankle joint. So what this is doing is engaging my hamstring and my glutes in my setup, as well as taking a lot of the pressure off the low back, freeing up my ability to rotate. And so I would not say just be cautious of this. I'm not saying push your butt back, because if I push my butt back, I'm going to add more curvature to my lumbar spine. Somebody at that point would tell you to pelvic tilt. By pushing your thighs back, you're bypassing that as a step. So pardon me for being so crass with answering a question with a question, but I would never want to not be in this posture. I would never want to hit a chip with all this curvature in my spine. From here, I'm going to lift. There's potentially my chili dip or my blade over the green, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I would never want to hit a bunker shot with my weight on the balls of my feet. Potentially from there, I might come up and out of my shot. There's my blade over the green. I would never want to hit a tee ball with my spine in a position where it cannot properly rotate. Because one of the first things I hear with the guys on the Champions Tour is they'll say, Eric, I'm getting older and losing my flexibility. I don't have the distance I had when I was younger. And I say to them 10 times out of 10, this is not a flexibility issue. It's a posture issue. We all know the member over dinner, well, one year they're sitting like this, and the next year they're like this. And all of a sudden they develop the yips. Those things are not just, wound together intimately, but systemic. And so today's the day where we nip that piece in the bud for the rest of our lives, both on as well as off the golf course. And so for me, what's been fun is being able to trace back, what might be the root cause of your issues and holistically prescribing the right fundamental. Because if we said over the course of today, which is very, very likely, that might save yourself 2 shots just through this understanding on the putting green. You're going to make a couple more short putts as well as we're going to improve your distance control based on the consistency of your contact. If the same concept also prevents you from flubbing 1 chip, you might have saved another shot, if not 2. If the same concept helps you not blade 1 bunker shot over the green and prevent the double, there's another 2 shots. If the same idea helps you keep 1 more tee ball in play because you're no longer coming up and out of your posture, there might be another 2. And so I've seen people literally go from an 18 to a 10 almost overnight using the same ideas. And so for the first 2 months working with Bernhard, we only focused on this. I wanted him to get really involved with in terms of understanding there is this consistency and continuity, which is where, for my breakthrough moment, if you call it that, Dave Marr did a cute segment where he likes to call me affectionately at that the Michelangelo of instructors. That's kind of his tagline. And have you guys been to Florence, by the way? Been to the Accademia? Seen David? Okay, so do me one favor. When you go back, don't think of me. But there are 2 schools of thought regarding how he carved David. One that says he took a piece of marble and he carved David. That's great. There's a second school of thought that says he took a piece of marble and he got rid of everything that wasn't David. If we have your putting stroke, if we get rid of the need for all the extra moving parts, what we're left with is a stroke that's much more consistent, classic, and repeatable. Secondarily, if we go ahead and we show you there's a continuity of fundamentals applied to every other part of the game, we can create a long rift of change. So if a tour player gives me a call and says, Eric, love for you to take a look at my full swing, which happened as recently as last week. He says, Eric, I'm a great driver of the golf ball, but my iron play suffers. The first thing I'm asking him is, do you keep your stance width the same, or do you get wider with the driver? And if he says, I get wider with the driver, I tell him I want you to get a little bit wider with your irons as well. Because if he gets too narrow, the club might get a little bit more inside. He might get a little bit more across the line. And where another coach might tell him to try to lay it off a little bit more, we're not addressing what's the root cause of the issue. And so for him, it was kind of fun to see him hit 15 and 16 greens every single day last event by making a very fundamental change and understanding why it's going to help. So we're going to go through this process together. And so I want everyone to go and stand up for me.
Hey, Eric, before we do anything, can you tell that guy what's wrong with his putting over there?
I would never tell anything that's wrong, but there's certain ways to add a little bit extra layer of polish. And this is going on your tab.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
I'm Scott.
Eric.
Eric,
Pleasure.
thank you.
Good
All
to
right.
meet you. So,
You're welcome, Scott.
by the way, it's a signed copy. It's on Amazon for like $1,000. Just kidding. So, everyone get your feet just outside the hip width apart. So most women might find that's a little bit wider than what they're used to. We're going to go through this a little bit more a little bit later, but I want you to put your hands on your thighs, and we're going to hinge our thighs back, so push the thighs back until the toes come up. The moment you feel the toes come up, that means you're counterbalanced over the ankle, at which point you add some flex. If you don't feel the toes come up, it means you're probably hinging forward and not hinging back. So your tipping point, for lack of better words, is based upon feeling the toes come up and then adding a little bit of flex to your knees. Beautiful. Good.
My yoga instructor would love this.
No question. And there's a reason why yoga has been a modality for as long as it has been, because it's functional human movement. So stand up straight. I mean, every asana typically begins with not the hips, but let's go a little bit lower with the thighs. Thighs hinge back while the upper body comes down. Beautiful. Add some flex to your knees. Beautiful. So stand up straight for me. Hinge your thighs back, let the upper body come down. Good. Now add some flex to the knees. Beautiful. So you see how it takes a little bit of the pressure off the low back?
Wow.
For sure. And from here, feel the weight more over the ankle. Awesome. Beautiful. Just stand up straight. Hinge the thighs back. Add some flex. Beautiful. You ever piping as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, I stopped once a year over to see Sean.
Oh, good.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, he's one of my heroes.
Beautiful. Now add some
Only
flex to your
one.
knees. See, so it takes the pressure off the low back a little bit,
Yes.
and the weight more over the ankle,
Mhm.
but not off balance, correct?
Not off balance.
Good. Awesome. Add some flex to your knees. Beautiful. So when you do this, let the upper body come down just a little bit more. You're keeping yourself a little bit too up. There you go. That's it. Beautiful. Hinge your thighs back. Add some flex. Beautiful. Really good. And from here, you're probably going to feel a little bit more of an ease, being able to rotate. Beautiful. Add some flex. So you don't have to look straight up. You let your head come down. Cervical spine, it's okay to create some flexion. Good. So hinge your thighs back. Awesome. Add some flex to your knees. Beautiful. Awesome. Feels a little bit different?
Yeah. By the way, I don't put my weight on my balls to my feet. I was
Good.
told that.
Right. No, exactly. And what's interesting, there's a reason why we're all told. You know, the PGA manual for instruction does say put your weight on the balls of your feet.
Yeah.
And they wonder why everyone in golf has an issue staying down in their posture.
So what are we feeling? We're feeling it all.
We're feeling
Evenly.
60% of our weight is more over the ankle.
Yeah.
And that's because you've now counterbalanced more over the ankle.
So I've got more control.
Yep. And see how it's a little bit easier to rotate from there too? Awesome. Say it again?
I was just saying, I don't need to, my personal thing is pelvic tilt. I have
Yeah.
an issue with that.
For sure. And so for as long as somebody would say, hey, push your butt back, you know, there would be, you know, that issue. But for as long as you're pushing your thighs back, we're bypassing very much all that issue as a step. Because if you're standing up straight, is there any compression or pressure that you feel? And that's where if you were to go this way, then you would.
Right.
And that's where by hinging the thighs back, we're not having to worry about that pelvic tilt piece.
Right.
So go and grab a seat. Let's dive deeper down the rabbit hole.